Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
Hi, Rob.
Friday.
How you doing?
Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday.
Good morning.
So is this anybody's first mastermind? If it is, just introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, I'm Tracy. I'm from Remax. Used to be Freedom. Now it's Select in the Villages.
Welcome.
I'm Melissa, and I'm with Remax in the Villages. It's not the Villages, it's Wildwood. We have a Wildwood address, but anyway, Wildwood / the Villages.
Okay.
How's that?
Yes, welcome.
I'm Renee. I'm the office manager at our Wildwood location, Remax Freedom, just acquired by Remax Select.
Hi, I'm Renee from Wildwood, Remax Freedom as well. Just good morning. Sorry.
Welcome, everybody. Gonna give one more minute for everybody to come on. So I want to have this one be a little bit more interactive than our normal mastermind series, and I want to find out from the group, how we do our listing appointment. And I want to, I think everybody can raise your hand, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so if you're by your computer, if you raise your hand just to give us an idea. How many of us use a one-step listing appointment, listing strategy versus a two? So if you use a one-step, raise your hand. So looks like the
If it requires 2 steps, that I do too.
okay. And who was that said that?
Melissa.
Melissa. So if it's necessary, you do too. What necessitates a two-stepper?
Only in the Villages they have it's of course it's a retirement area. If their kids are down and they're you get a referral for it, and they want you to come out there and just kind of give them, they're there going through mom and dad's stuff, and they just kind of want your opinion of what needs to stay or what needs to go, should you paint, should you not, and then and you just introduce yourself, and you're kind of working with them on getting things done or giving them referrals.
Okay.
And then I've gone on one that they were ready to sign right there. They didn't interview anybody else.
So what is your expectation when you go there?
To get a signed listing.
I know, but
sometimes it doesn't happen.
I mean, do you expect to get 40% signed the first trip, or 70%, or what's that number look like in your mind?
I would love to get 100% signed every time I go on a listing appointment, but
So do you want a ballpark, like, when you go there, 40% you get listed the first time, 35% the second time, and 25% don't list with you for whatever reason? Like, what would those numbers look like?
I'm probably not a very good one to be asking this question. You probably need a more seasoned realtor in the Villages to be asking this question.
All right, so I'm gonna ask a couple of people. Brian in Arizona, like what is your when you go out, do you expect to get 100%? You normally get X, and some of them you have to go out twice?
There's always an expectation of 100%, but I think reality is probably pulling in about 80% of the listing appointments that I go on. I do use a two-step process because, and the reason I do this is when I go out, I just want to walk the house with them, have a little bit of a conversation, say, hey, it's a 15 to 30-minute appointment. I need to see your house before I can do valid comps on it. I used to do a one-step process, but then I kind of, through learning a lot of different things, especially on the luxury side, it is how can you come up with a number that fast off the top of your head on a one visit with that client? So I also say, hey, I'm going to stop out, take a look at your house, do that. Then I'm going to come back. I'm going to do some realistic comps. I really want to dive in deep on this, come up with a good number. And I think it sets an expectation for them. And like I'm doing more than just the average person is.
So you believe in the two-step model for the reason that you mentioned, like it's hard for you to give them a accurate price without seeing the property first, which is a very valid belief, in my opinion.
Right.
Brian, I was always told by people that it's, you know, you need to see the house first before you can come up with the comps. And, you know, what I've discovered personally, and, you know, this is a personal preference, and we're having this discussion to figure out the merits of both, is that, you know, most of the time, you're 95% of what you expect is what you get if you ask the right questions before you go out. So there's rarely any massive surprises, right? Like this place has been destroyed or this place is, you know, been massively upgraded beyond my thoughts. And with those two scenarios, you know, I find that if you believe you can make adjustments on the fly, that you can come out with the listing. You know, I've got out with some of your peers here where they've put an addition on that, you know, early on in my career, I didn't ask, or I just assumed it was what it was in the tax record, and, you know, made adjustments on the fly, and it worked out very well. So, open mind, you know, no judgment here, just trying to pass along some best practices. Is there anyone, Brian, what do you do when the house isn't ready, and what percentage of houses aren't ready to be listed when you go out there? Like you need to declutter, you need to do a little bit of cosmetic cleanup.
I think probably about 85% of them are not ready.
And how do you execute the agreement? I'm not, you know, admittedly, I'm not familiar with the laws in Arizona. Can you post date, or can you sign a contract today to be effective in 3 weeks?
There is that option, yeah, because we have a listing date, we have an on-market date, and an expiration date. So we can take the listing today, which is the smartest thing that you want to do, because they can't change their mind to go with somebody else if they want to. So we don't want to post date because it does give them the opportunity to back out. So if I'm going on a listing appointment today, June 20th, I'm putting June 20th as the listing date, that we may not put till June 25th or July 1st as the market date. So I have them locked in. So if anything happens to that house, a neighbor wants to buy it, they're talking to somebody else, any other conversation that goes on, we've already captured that opportunity that we're going to get paid on that property through that listing agreement.
Well, that's very impressive, and it looks like your broker Gary was smiling. I'm not sure. Is that's very accurate, right, Gary?
Yeah, very accurate. I always recommend, even if I see that they take the listing and put the listing date, say July 1st, I will remind them, hey, I would go and put the listing date or actual listing date as the date that you sign it, because you don't give them the chance to sell the house themselves, or somebody else come in and with an offer before that actual marketing date.
So the Arizona agreement says the listing date and then the marketing date is separate, spelled out. I think that's fantastic. Let's see. One of our resident experts there in New Jersey, Robert, we can't do that, right?
Well, you can have
Delayed showing, right?
late showing, yes.
But it's kind of like it's kind of like a workaround, because it would be great if our listing agreement did say that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's a renewable type thing too.
Yep. So
How about Florida?
So hold on. We'll get to Florida in just a minute, and we'll even tap into Pennsylvania. But you know, in New Jersey, a lot of times, you know, they'll be like, "Oh, my house isn't ready to go on." You know, many agents will say, "Okay, well, I'll come back out when we do the photography. We'll sign it or whatever." And you know, that's where, you know, the neighbor pops up, or, you know, that you find out that their brother-in-law is all of a sudden licensed, and you lose the deal. And in New Jersey, there are agents that has happened to, and then there's agents that will happen to. If they don't use that process, it's inevitable. It's unfortunate. I hear about it. It could be your best friend. There was an agent that kids went to school 20 years together. They went to church together, ironically, and they had no doubt that this person wasn't going to stick it to them. They put the pot on the driveway to clean things out, and a neighbor came over, wanted to buy the house. The homeowner went to their attorney, said, "Am I obligated?" The attorney said no, and our agent got shafted. So it doesn't even matter what type of a relationship you have. Good contracts make great friends.
So that's, that's part of my concern with the two-step approach to a listing. Is that once you walk out that door, regardless of what a great feeling you had about the discussion that you had with the seller, the next guy walking in the door while you're out trying to figure out what the right price should be might get the listing before you have a chance to even make that second appointment or
Yes,
attend that second appointment.
and if you have magnets on your car, take them off before you go there.
Yep.
Because if I've heard stories that I see an agent with the magnets on their car at the house, somebody will go there afterwards and knock on the door and interfere with your relationship. So, Robert, thank you for sharing that. Let's go to Florida. Who wants to share with us what's the best practice about, I'm sitting there getting my listing and it's not ready for 3 weeks. What do we do in Florida?
So we have 3 weeks in coming soon status. That's maximum legally. And most of the time I advise people to take that time to stage, to declutter, to clean. When it comes to like curb appeal, so many homes need the love and tender care. I mean, even as much as weed whacking and just the lawnmower to go out, they haven't had it landscaped, fresh mulch. You need time to do these things. Maybe there's some painting that can be done, and anything that can be done before the first showing is going to be best, because we all know that the first buyer, the first showing could be your first offer, your only offer.
And David, you said that you have up to 3 weeks on the coming soon.
Yes.
Now, for our Florida folks, is that a specific board or MLS regulation or a state? Because I find some of those rules to be specific to MLSs. So some MLSs in New Jersey do not allow coming soon, some do. Does anybody have any expertise on that in our Florida market?
Well, I don't think we have 3 weeks for coming soon. I think it's 10 days.
I know in my
No,
market for 1 days.
It's 21 days here as well.
It's board specific, I believe.
It's 21 days in Broward and Palm Beach.
Right.
Also, you can get the contract. What I do is I just get the contract signed and I just post date it, because we're allowed to do that here. I know in some states you can't do that, but here we just post date the listing. So if I got a listing today and they're not ready for 2 weeks, I won't put it on the market. I could put coming soon. I didn't think it was 21 days, but I mean, if they need some time, what I'll do is get it post dated, have them sign it for like July 15th. And as we approach July 15th, I'll ask them, are you guys ready to go? If they say yes, then the property goes on the market.
And Nicole, you're in a separate state of Florida. You're in West Florida, like West Virginia.
Northwest Florida, yeah. But I am a member of 2 different associations. We have the coming soon option, but it is managed by the association, because I'm also on the board, and they regulate it. So they make sure you use a form that you download from that MLS, and if it's not in your disclosures, you're gonna get an email, and it can be changed and adapted. You just have to let your local board know that, hey, they need another 10 days or whatever. You can change it. But I think it's a good tool because the agents have visibility, so they can see that it's coming, and of course the third parties don't have that information. So it's helpful for realtors.
And how about in Pennsylvania? Do we have any opinion on how things transact there with, coming soons or pre-listings?
Mandela on?
I saw her here. I don't know if she might be on,
She might be driving. I saw her in the beginning. Yeah.
all right. All right, we'll get the Pennsylvania ruling soon. I see my friend Justin Watson. How do you do it in Virginia, sir? If you're able to chime in here. Justin Watson to the principal's office. Any? All right. Well, I'll check back with him, but you see, it's kind of all over the place. So
Justin's somewhere he can't
where
talk.
he can't talk.
Yeah.
All right, Justin. Thank you. After working with a lot of agents with a lot of different beliefs, my fundamental belief is that time kills all deals. And when you walk away and you come back, a lot of things can happen and very few of them are good. Okay. And if we all understand the principle of, you go out there, you have a conversation, they're ready to sign in 4 minutes, then the appointment is over, right? You don't talk your way out of a piece of business, which I've seen people do in my career, right? They're ready to go and you keep talking, zip it and get out, or zip it and then tell them here's what's next and move on. So for those of you who are doing two-step successfully, I'm not here to critique it. I'm just here to say that, there's some efficiency with doing it once. And, do you ever hear the saying, done is better than perfect, right? And maybe, Brian, you're somebody that wants to make sure everything is, perfect. You don't want to be off by, 3%. But if you're close enough and then you explain to them, hey, I didn't expect your kitchen to be so beautiful. You must have spent 6 figures on this, right? You can say, I think we can go up a little bit higher. And I think most people would find that to be acceptable, right? Not, I'm angry that that you gave me a value without looking at it. But that's everybody's opinion. Let's see.
So, Rob, I just have one more thing I'd like to say on this point. And that is that I always felt when I went into these conversations that I was supposed to be the expert in that neighborhood. So I would go in having done 3 different CMAs, a house that was fully updated, a house that was partially updated, and a house that was not updated at all. So that I could then, when I walked through the house with the sellers, I could determine a price for them because I already had the knowledge. I'd already done the CMAs. And I think that they liked that because it seemed that I really knew the neighborhood and what the values were. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
Okay,
Rob.
well,
Thanks, Rob. You had a lot of good information. And I'll clarify on my two-step process, I do comps before I walk into that house. When I go on that first appointment, I have the comps done. I have the paperwork filled out because you don't know, Rob, like you just said, hey, you're 4 minutes in and they just say, hey, let's get this thing listed. You've got to be prepared for that. But if I know that they're going to be interviewing people, that's really where my two-step process comes in really, really powerfully, because when I go in there and have that conversation, if they're not ready to list at that very second, I can't get them to list it on the two-step process. I just say, hey, well, I'm here to look at your house and I wanted to see your home. I said, I know you're going to be interviewing some other agents, but how are they just on the fly going to give you a price on your house? Can you walk over? If you were to come over to my house right now, would you be able to tell me how much my house is worth? And I say, so I want to go back and do some really good comps, because how are those people really going to come up with that price? I mean, there's always caveats to that. There's a couple of neighborhoods that I work really well. I pretty much know every house in there. I've sold several of them multiple times. So I can go in there with super confidence, 100% on those, because I know those subdivisions so well.
right. I mean,
I have a question really quick. What was the saying? Done is better than gone? What did you say?
No. Done is better than perfect.
Done is better than perfect. Okay.
right? Because sometimes you struggle with perfection, you never complete the project. Okay.
Like that.
Wilson, are you able to role play with me for a second?
Let's do it.
So I was just talking with one of our top agents in Virginia, and we were kind of, I was kind of critiquing, out of love, his conversation style, right? And if you are like that local expert, right, and you're in a subdivision in Tucson or even an area that you don't know, I think that you can come across as being very genuine, authentic, caring by asking some really good questions, before you go out on the appointment. And that will be a differentiator as well. So I might say, Wilson, tell me a little bit about how long have you lived there? Tell me what improvements you've done. Hey, if you don't mind me asking, when you originally bought the house 9 years ago, what were the two or three things that attracted you most to the property, right? And you could ask that to somebody in the wrong tonality and they'll be annoyed. And you can ask it where it's an engaging one. They hang up and they say, wow, Wilson really cared. He asked a lot of really good questions, right? So, I would say let's get into the habit of, starting to build that rapport before we even get out there. And, that will, if done right, that will show that you care. If done inappropriately, they'll feel like you're just trying to, like, if you talk a little bit too quick and you don't sound authentic, you might turn people off. But I really believe that, you're probably going to turn them off when you get there anyway, if that's your modality and your style. Okay. And, you'll be able to get 95% accuracy by asking the right questions. And Brian, it sounds like you get that anyway. It's just a matter of, do you expect to have that signing on that date? And I learned this, I'm going to raise both my hands. I learned this completely by accident. Okay. I don't know if Amy Roan is on the call, but, one day Amy called me and said that, she was referred to the spouse of, the couple. The husband was the alpha and the spouse said, my friend said Amy did a great job. And, we kind of got an entry point to get an appointment. But the owner said, look, we're going to be interviewing. I already have 3 people I'm interviewing. And he said, to be honest with you, I don't want to list with a brokerage that's in Tinton Falls when my house is in Rumson. And, if you don't want to go, I understand. But my wife just wanted me to interview you. It was kind of like an obligatory thing. So Amy's like, if you don't want to go, I get it, right? But we went out there. And, the conversation went exceptionally well. And Amy didn't even bring in Amy had the listing paperwork in the car, didn't even bring it in. And when we finished the conversation, Bruce and his wife were like, can we get this on the market by next Saturday? And there's like that perfect example. We never discussed the other 3 people that never got to come in. Okay. We got the owner to price it where it should be without, arm wrestling with the 2 of them. And, it was a preparation and a communication masterclass, not a we have market share masterclass, right? Because a lot of people come in there and say, hey, we have, 22% market share in the homes in Rumson over 2 million, right? And they think that's impressive. But, some people might say, well, where's the other 78%? Is that by one person or, is that split by 19 companies, right? So, the confidence in the way that you connect is really important. I have a couple things I just wanted to go through shotgun. Who does a pre-listing package? Just by show of hands, do you do that? So, and who doesn't do a pre-listing pack, just so I can see who's raising hands and not. Okay, so it looks like we probably have about double the amount. What do you do with your pre-listing package? Do you email it? Do you hand deliver it? Who wants to share that?
So it all depends on the client, and all depends on were they referred, were they calling me from a mailer? Were they calling one of the agents from, just knowing them in the neighborhood? Sometimes giving them a little bit about you to go over and building that rapport, spending a little bit more time on the phone and getting them prepped sets you up for success. So you've driven by, you've done your comps, but you go in there, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And if you have that confidence, I mean, you should be going in with the mindset that it's your listing and you're going to get it 100% of the time. I would say personally, I feel like I get 9 out of 10 listing appointments. And I think that if you don't go in thinking you're prepared, you know what you're doing, you know the comps. I mean, you should be prepared for all the questions that could come up. But I mean, they're going to feel you and you're going to feel them, and you got to decide if you want to work with them as well. And I think when a client feels that, they get that authenticity right away from you, and they know like you're good to go,
So, David, thanks for sharing. Gary Greenacre, when you were more active, or if you do go on a listing appointment in this market, do you do a pre-listing?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And how do you deliver that?
A lot depends on the people. I try to do it to where I drop it off. But if it's the case that it's, on the other side of town, it's 45 minutes away, whatever, around on the 101, I'll just tell them I'm going to email them a lot of information that I'm going to ask them to have prepared before we get together. Included in that will be the seller's property disclosure. That usually becomes a conversation piece between the time that they get it and the time that we, before we meet. They'll have questions on that. And the nice thing I feel about that is if they're already filling it out when I've asked them to, I've got the listing when I get there.
And you give them the pricing or you don't?
Again, it depends on the pre-qualification questions. I've got pre-qual questions, and I ask them, what do you think, based on your neighborhood, what is your expectation of your sales price?
Okay.
If I get an answer, and I feel it's in line once I do the market analysis and stuff on it, I'll include that with.
So I believe the merits of giving it out is that they have some time to digest it and come to grips with it. I think the downfall to it is if they don't like it, you cancel the appointment, or they might come armed for trying to convince you that it's worth more, which is really a place where I don't want to be. So if I were to do, and this is just one person's opinion, and from somebody who hasn't sold houses like you, but have been assisting, is I would come out with maybe just some reviews of people that have said, good stories and good testimonials. I'd probably put in there a case study showing how maybe somebody really succeeded, and maybe even how somebody failed, by showing how you got your buyer a better deal on a listing that was mispriced. Right, that would be how I would do it. I wouldn't destroy a listing agent, but I would say, hey, when I work with buyers, I look for properties that are mispriced so that we can have an advantage as a buyer. And as a seller, I just want you to be aware of how the market, treats stale properties, right? So pre-listing package or not, you should at least have a strategy and be consistent with it. Second is hyper-focused discussion, right? Which means that we're asking a lot of questions. And, one question that I don't always remember to ask is, hey, Brian, what does a win look like for you? If we have a good relationship, what does a win look like? And listen to what they say. Because a lot of times we presuppose that it's just they get the highest amount, right? But a win might be, we want to have a buyer that's reasonable. We don't want to have stress and anxiety. We want to have clear communication. We want no surprises, right? And they might not talk about price. Does anybody ever ask, what does a win look like for you as part of the process? Wilson does. Anybody else? Does anybody think that's a good question to add now? So
Yes,
yeah,
I love it. I
what-
think
what-
I'm going to use it.
Yeah, what does a win look like for us, Lisa?
Yeah, one
So,
thing from Brian Buffini a long time ago is like, if I could wave a magic wand, what does the perfect transaction look like for you?
yeah, and I think, yeah, Brian, that's your communication style, right? Like if you're comfortable saying that, it's basically the same thing as what does a win look like for you, right? Um, even talking about what does a win look like for you, how about, Brian, what's the cadence of communication, right? Because some sellers might expect to get feedback after every showing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some agents might give feedback after every showing, but if you mismanage that expectation, you can feel like you did a great job, and they can be like, Brian, he was annoying. I wish he would have just gave me all the data at the end of the week and gave me a summary. Or somebody else is like, they left 5 minutes ago. Do you have any feedback? Right. But if you don't have that discussion, there's an opportunity to have a mismatch of expectations, right?
Absolutely.
Anybody ever have an appraiser that comes with an appraisal that just really annoyed you? I mean, you have to be honest. I'm sure everybody on this call you've had a bank appraiser come out, and here's what really annoys me: when they come in $6,000 short on a $400,000 house. I'm like, what are you, God? Like it's either worth it or it's not. Like, how do you come in $6,000 short? Usually it's because they have a complex that they're better than you, or this is worth exactly $6,000 less, Nicole. Now you got to figure out how you put this puzzle back together. I think sellers, might have similar pet peeves about us, right? And I think, if we ask questions about, do you want to get that email? Do you want to call? How often do you want to do it? Typically, I call all my clients on Tuesdays, and I give an update on the activity over the weekend and all the showings from the week, right? You're setting that correct expectation. Who thinks that you win your listings because you showcase superior marketing when you're out on the listing appointment? Anybody?
I think it's a combination of superior marketing and your value proposition. If your value proposition is strong enough to where you show a strategy that will produce success, and then you have marketing to augment that, that's a pretty strong 1-2 punch. But I definitely think they go together, because everybody, the major companies have nice marketing stuff. I would hate to be gambling on such a thin margin that I'm going to get that listing based on a flyer. I'd rather tell them how they're going to get more money from me based on what we do prior to going on the market, what we do once officially listed for sale, and what we do through the negotiation, escrow, and closing process.
And that's a great observation.
Come to the front door.
All right. Data-driven pricing, right? That's where you're like the appraiser saying it's worth, 400,000, not 406 or not 395. Data-driven pricing. Who relies a lot on data, or tell me how you get to the list price?
How about jump in here? So on our CMAs, gives a median sale price, which is pretty much middle of the road, not an average. It's the middle. And it shows the median listing price, the median sale price. So I tell the homeowner, listen, I'm not going to argue with the data. Here's my gut feeling. What are your thoughts? And then when I hear what their thoughts are, I stick with the data. I might share my gut. 9 out of 10 times, I pretty much find the price that's agreeable to both of us, and seems to work out the majority of the time.
Now, and yeah, everybody should be taking notes, because this gentleman, Bobby Golden, is regularly the top agent in Woodbridge Township, one of the biggest towns in the state. So you can't argue with that. but I'm going to go in the boxing ring with Mike Tyson. So Bobby, my outsider's perspective is I love what you're talking about to get to what I would call the appraised value. Okay. And I would be very careful not to own a value. Okay. I would say, look, Bobby, I want to share with you how, a property is scientifically reviewed by, let's say, an appraiser. Okay. This is how they do it. And this is how they would come up with the appraised value. The good news is I want to give you some options. Okay. And I want to share with you how people who list it close to the appraised value have how they've what the outcome's been in Woodbridge Township. I want to share with you how some sellers who've priced it slightly below the market, the marketing time and the ultimate sales price for those homeowners. And then I want to share with you the homeowners that tried to win the lottery. They did the new car pricing strategy, or they priced it aspirationally as, hey, if I found the perfect buyer, maybe they would pay me this. Does that make sense? Would you like to have some options, Bobby?
And the answer would be yes. So your dialogue is different than my dialogue, but the message is the same. So I'll flip the script here. So I'd say, Rob, here's the conversation I have with every homeowner. Every homeowner comes to a fork in the road. Some homeowners want to be aggressive. Some homeowners want to test the market. Either strategy is okay, but you're the one that's going to pick the strategy. I use a pricing pyramid every time I have a listing appointment. I say, here is the aggressive approach. Here's the testing the market approach. The minute I show them the aggressive approach, that's when they say, oh, I'm not going to give my house away. I'm not telling you to give your house away, but some homeowners decide to take the aggressive approach. But the minute they see that aggressive approach, they forget about testing the market. So they don't look at the high point testing the market. They don't want to do the aggressive approach. They go right in the middle, which is exactly where I want them to be competitive. So I say fork in the road, aggressive versus testing the market. I use the pricing pyramid. I do give them their options. What would you like to do? Be aggressive, or would you like to test the market? And then by the time I get done with that conversation, they're saying to me, Bobby, I'm comfortable writing this range, which is where my recommendation is anyway.
Bobby, do you bring testimonials to your listing appointments?
I don't, but I'm starting to use them on my social media more.
So I'm going to give the top listing agent in Woodbridge advice. Is how bold am I? Maybe foolish, but you have raving fans, Bobby. Why keep it a secret, right? And keep circulating some more recent ones into the mix. Okay, and I think another opportunity that is probably evergreen for a year is case studies. Okay, and I just recently came up with the way of analyzing it, how an overpriced home performs. And I find a way to say, my buyers are often taking advantage of foolish sellers who try to overprice their house. And we're able to get an extraordinary value when we buy a property that's been rejected by the market. And we find that we have less competition for houses that are perfectly good. And if we decide to work together, Bobby, I would make it a high priority to make sure that you don't fall into that list.
Makes sense.
Can
All
I
right.
ask,
The
can I
other
ask
thing,
a dumb question?
Sure.
Bobby was talking about an average price and a middle of the road price. I'm not sure what the difference is.
all right, so I'll explain the data that I look at. So when I do a CMA through our multiple listing system, it gives an average asking price, it gives an average sale price. Then the next column, it gives the median asking price and the median sale price. So that's kind of where my starting point is. And then that's where I go into fork in the road. You want to be aggressive, you want to test the market, but I use that median, which is right in the middle. I use that median sale price as a starting point to start my discussion. And then
And how big a difference is there between median and average?
Sometimes it could be as much as $15,000, sometimes it's almost right on the number.
Okay.
But it
So-
starts the conversation. I also say to homeowners a lot, listen, your home is unique. These comparables it's not cookie cutter. There are no two homes alike in this particular neighborhood. I also like what Robert Garver had to say before. I go in with 3 market analysis locked and loaded, and then when I sit down, I know which one to use. Do I use the neighborhood one? Do I use the similar style one? Is it a 2 or a 3 bedroom? So I bring all that information with me so I don't have to come back. I use a one-step approach, one-stop approach. But I try to come, I also go on Google. So if a homeowner calls me up, I don't have, generally speaking, they want to see me within a day or two. So I don't have time to do a pre-listing package or do a lot of research. I go to Google, I look at the house, I pretty much know what's there. And then from there, I put my reports together. When I get to the door, I'm ready. The reports that I don't need, I don't even pull out. I keep them in the folder. I know what to use when I'm sitting down with the homeowner at the table.
So, Bobby, I'm going to give you one observation that you may not be incorporating into your analysis, which is every MLS that I've worked on, when you look at list to sales price, what they use is they use the last list price before it went under contract. If you are able to add to your criteria, it's often very difficult, and it's often very hard to do an export. So when you export this data, you get a file that goes out like not just A to Z, it goes like A, C to Z is like 70 or 80 columns going across, and you only need about 9 columns, so you have to sort through a lot of data. But properties that are on the market often have 1 or 2 price reductions that are significant before they go under contract. And if you just look at the sale to ask price, if it's the sale to last ask price, it's going to distort the data and maybe give a seller a false expectation of the damage is not that severe by overpricing it from the beginning or trying the market. Okay.
Very valid point.
Right. So there's no MLS that I know of, Bobby, that when you pull list to sale price gives you the original list price. And it's probably an extra 10 minutes worth of work, but I think it means the world. Okay. And if you weren't blessed to have a stellar reputation and this tremendous market share, it would probably have a bigger impact on your ability to get listings and listings priced right.
So Rob, one of the things that I wanted to mention too is years ago we had what we called a brag book, which was a notebook in which I had the awards that I had won, and I had the comments from my previous clients, extolling the virtues of the business that I had done. And this was part of that. I would drop this off like the day before a conversation so they'd have time to review it, just so they knew all about me. And the second purpose for it, I found over the years, is when you find yourself in a slump, and you start to question your ability, you can look back at this, it's all in one place, and see what people said about you that point out that you really knew what you were doing. So it's a little bit of work to put it together, but I think that it's very worthwhile.
And Robert, I love that as a pre-listing drop-off. Okay. I don't, me personally, I understand why people give like the comps and the range ahead of time so that there's no shock value. But I really feel that through a series of asking proper questions, that I can have clients realize what the best strategy is to position their house. That's just a personal preference. And I know that there's some breakage when you send out a estimate of value, right? We've all heard about agents that buy a listing, correct? They mislead a seller,
Yes.
either through greed or ignorance, that their house is worth more. And it's probably cost every one of us on this call a listing in our career, if not more, that we don't even know about. So those are the merits and the drawbacks. couple other comments that I have. I am a big data person, right? And I have a way of connecting with people without having that tension of the pricing conversation, right? Because in my mind, I look at it as if most listing appointments are me sitting across the table, either practically sitting across, or like emotionally sitting across the table as almost like an adversary, right? I'm trying to sell you on my services. I try to have the mental image of me sitting in between the two home sellers, right? And saying, if we decide to work together, here's 3 strategies. Which one do you like, right? And as soon as they pick one of the strategies, it's implied that I'm getting the business, right? I never have to ask for the closing. And that's just my style, and it works for me. And the whole purpose of these masterminds is to, pick a little something from Bobby, a little something from Robert, from Brian, and everybody, and David, who's making contributions, and figure out like, how can you improve 1 or 2% by taking 1 or 2 of these tips.
Rob?
Yes.
I'd like to go back to the pricing discussion. And one of the most uncomfortable conversations you can have in a market like this is a seller telling you, we hired you because you said we could get this much. A way to avoid that, the way I've avoided that conversation, and the wind up of it being Bobby's strategy, is that, because I pursue a lot of expired listings where I don't know the neighborhood. So what I'll do is I'll do my research. I'll come up with 4 properties that if I were a buyer and I was looking at my prospective client's house, I would also be looking at these. I would bring my computer to the seller at the listing appointment, lay out the 4 properties in order from least expensive to most, show them photos of each, and then have them slot their properties in between where they think our house is better than this one, but not as good as this one. Now you've established a range. Now you go. Sorry.
So Richard, I think what you're doing, we have a lot. Do a lot of other people have been trained to do that or do that type of analysis? And I'm interrupting you for a reason, Richard, because I've been co-pilot with you on those listing appointments, not with you personally, but you on this call. And I've gotten into discussions about my kitchen's better than theirs. I have my backyard is on the lake, and you're trying to discuss what the value of the extra square footage on the backyard is, right? You've been there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Richard, this is going to be a big gift for you, or you might just put it in your back pocket and never use it. But I never get into those weeds, and there's another thing I never get into, which is, when you talk about price or value proposition, if you talk about, hey, I'm going to do drones, I'm going to do high definition photography, I'm going to do virtual staging, right? And if they're concerned about price, they're going to say Discount Joe said they're going to do the same thing, right? And then you can't disprove somebody's not going to do it unless you go to their listings and you show them the difference. But to me, that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. It's a very logical rabbit hole, Richard, but it's one I don't want to go down. Okay, if I'm in rapport and I've built trust and I have some case studies, and think about being in that appointment, right? And you could be sitting across a long dining room table and feel like you're complete adversaries in a courtroom, but mentally, I'm seeing myself as sitting in between the 2 of them saying, hey, if we decide to work together, what strategy do you want to use, right? So as soon as they answer that question, oh, well, I think we want to price it just a little bit below the appraised value or the market value. Fantastic. The next step is we need to arrange a date for right? It just goes that naturally, right? And I know Joe Garcia is probably making phone calls now, but when you have that rapport, I was at a FISBO appointment with Joe, who's probably 26 years old, looks like he's 17. So he's got that youth disadvantage to him. And we're out there, and the spouse is an attorney, giving me the 9th degree about the lawsuit and everything else. And at some point during the conversation, I just go to the daughter of the mother that's going into assisted living. I say, "Do you have a spare key?" She goes and gets the key, puts it on a ring, and hands it to me. And the husband goes, "Are you giving them the listing?" And she just goes, "Well, I guess I am." And sometimes it's just that simple when you're in rapport, right? And if I was talking about, your house is nicer than this one, not nicer than that one, you can create some animosity, right? You can
Well, this
be
is,
like,
yeah,
you
yes,
can
and
be
this is
saying,
why,
Richard, you don't have the cutest baby on the planet, right? Your baby's average. That's not going to get me any brownie points, right? So
right.
again, it's a preference. You're very logical. I'm very statistical, and unemotional, right? And another big thing that I see a lot of our competition, and maybe you as well, are missing this component, but the amount of competition there is almost as important as the comps, right?
Right.
Because the comps that you have may be going back 3 to 6 months, right? For closings, but that means that they could have been under contract 9 months ago. The market could be very different, and the market could be very different in 2 weeks. Okay. Here's an example, and I probably showed this on our calls before, but this is a real live one. So this is from an agent that has the #1 market share in Plainfield by a magnitude of like 50% higher than the #2 person. Her listing business is often based on recommendations and what do you want me to do? What do you recommend I list at? And they just sign. Well, here was an instance where our agent came to me and said, "Rob, I'm going up against the #2 agent who sold them the property. Not a bad agent, probably going to get it, but I at least want to have a shot. And my listing appointment is based all upon, their comfort and referral to me. I say, I recommend you list it at this. They say yes. So we did this analysis, and I wouldn't be showing it to you if we didn't win it, but we almost always win it. And this shows that I put houses in buckets. And in this community, homes that were selling between, I think it was listed between 625 and 750. The ones that sold in under 30 days had an average start price of 635 and a sale price of 658 for almost a 4% premium. The ones that listed at about 658, they listed at 663, they actually sold for $33,000 less. And then the ones that listed really aggressively sold for almost at a 10% discount. So when presented with this information, the seller's like, well, I don't want to be in the bottom. I don't want to sell it for 10% less. Maybe we can go a little bit below what the market value is, right? What the accumulation of the comps are so that we can get a premium on it. And, that's where they're looking at the data, and the data speaks for itself. I mean, if you list it for 635, you get 663. If you list it for 658, you get 630. Like, Brian, how would you want to list your house? Right? You don't want to list it for higher and get less. And the beautiful part about it was, Sandy said when she was going over it with the clients, they're like, oh, I know that house. I know that one. Oh, that one's right over there, right? So like they didn't look at each one and say, I have a better lot, all those minor details that sometimes we get caught in the weeds on, but they just looked at the patterns and how properties trade. And unfortunately for her, from the date that she went on that appointment, like 5 new properties came on that were competing that were probably all priced a little bit more aggressively because of the competition. So when I say, if I meet you today and we put it on in 2 weeks, if the 4 properties that you're competing with are now down to 1, maybe we can adjust it upwards. And if the 4 properties become 9, maybe we need to be a little bit more aggressive. Brian, does that sound reasonable to you in Arizona?
Absolutely, it does.
And if I'm having a conversation with a homeowner I think that makes all the sense in the world, right? And you can say, good news, Brian, 3 of the 4 houses are now sold. I think we might be able to up this by another $20,000 and still have activity. Or you might be able to have that credibility where you can say, you know what, we were going to put it on at 650. I really recommend 639 now to get the activity. Can you see how that comes across as extremely credible?
Absolutely. You're a counselor now, not a salesman.
Yeah,
This is so important, Rob, right here, this specific moment in the call, because I'm seeing so many agents, including some of ours, listening too much and not advising enough. They're going, and I see Wilson shaking his head. I see so many agents just signing the listing, getting it on the market. They've done some great marketing, but we all know that it's overpriced, and it might sell, it might not sell, but they keep showing these price reductions. I see it every day on social. The emails are coming through with these price reductions. Man, if you would have listened to yourself and just put it at the market, the right price, you would have gotten, like you're showing in these statistics, over the asking price. So I think people need to get the confidence and maybe role play, find a partner within our organization to buddy up with and get stronger at, because they're getting opportunities to list, but they're not serving the client the right way. They're not helping themselves out enough.
So a couple other things that probably don't need to be said, but I think I just want to mention. Always try to get there like 10 or 15 minutes early so that you're not stressed out when you get there, because your body language and your whole demeanor changes when you're stressed out. Like if your first word is, I apologize for being 10 minutes late, you might be getting away with it most of the time. But the ones that you really need to win, you're going to lose. Okay. So, there's traffic in every one of our markets. There's traffic. So if I come to Brian's house and I say, oh, Brian, I'm sorry I'm late, there was traffic, I'd be like, isn't there traffic every day, Brian?
Yeah.
You just don't make me feel important. Number 2 is preparation. Okay. And preparation doesn't mean you need to present it, right? Preparation means that you have it at your disposal if you need it, right? So if you printed out 32 pages, you're not going to go through all 32 pages. You might take their unique concern and bring out 1 or 2 pages to resolve that concern and then just move forward. Okay. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Nobody wants to work with somebody that's not confident. And I think few people want to work with somebody that's arrogant. And there's a fine line between that. Okay. You need to be confident. I think confidence is, the way you speak. I think arrogance is trying to convince somebody that you're competent by barking louder, right? So anyway, I mean, for most of this call, we've had 73 people, just a couple people dropped off. I think it's been tremendous content, and it's because of all of you, not because of me. I just kind of get the conversation started here. But I hope you get 1 or 2 or 3 takeaways. And, Richard, when I give you suggestions, it's just because I've been there, and I'm like, that makes me crazy when I'm trying to tell somebody your kitchen's not worth 100,000 more than the next guy's. And, once I'm in those weeds, you can't get out. So I choose not to get there.
I get it.
Right. And, yeah.
Rob, I just want to offer up one last tidbit on the list that you just gave us. So number 1, when you show up late, it's an awkward situation. But when you're late, you're late, you're running late. What saved me many, many times is when I call and say, I'm on my way, traffic's a little rough, or my last appointment ran a little bit late. I'm on my way. I'll be there in a couple of minutes. That diffuses the whole situation. So that call to acknowledge the fact that you're late, you're running late, people don't ever give you a hard time over that, because we all understand.
So Bobby, a master can take a problem and build it into a rapport building opportunity. But over time, you're going to get somebody who's like, this person's late. I'm a little bit perturbed about it. And, I would say try to plan not to be late and try to plan to be there, 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early, so that you can run through the process in your mind before you go there, right? Because if you're trying to make that light so you're not late, then you pull up 1 minute before, like you're like, thank God I got here, but you're not your best version of yourself. You can't be.
Yeah.
So,
Rob, mind if I say
if I
something
could
real
just
quick?
say one thing to David's
Absolutely.
earlier point. In Morris County, New Jersey, highly irregular. Since the beginning of June, there have been 105 price changes, and 102 of them have been reductions. So, to his point, if we're just putting them on the market at any price to get the listing, and then we find ourselves on that list that shows that we were wrong and we priced it too high, it's not to our benefit.
So I'm gonna call an audible for a few minutes extra because this is just great content. But what I want to mention to everybody here is, so many of you are so talented in your local markets, you know exactly what you're doing, but sometimes just a little bit of a pivot in your conversation means all the world, right? Instead of, I say, can you win an argument with a homeowner or a seller? And the answer is yes, but you normally don't get the listing. So why get into the argument, right? In terms of coming to you getting to a closing, when you ask questions that lead them to signing the papers, right? It's like, hey Brian, if we decided to work together, which strategy would you like to use? Then it's like, well, when would you like the first open house? All right, what happens next is we sign the paperwork with the effective date today. The on-market date is going to be the 9th, and you just go with confidence, not arrogance. Like they just follow along, right? And then they probably leave and they say, wow, Brian, this is going to be a problem. What are we going to tell your nephew? But that's just how, how good and comfortable you make them feel. Okay. There's a lot of people that are really smart. A lot of people are really good agents, but if they can't communicate the value, they're struggling. They're struggling.
Rob, mind if I
And
say something real quick?
absolutely.
One thing is I'm seeing all the comments in here about how this has been so helpful. Love hearing how everyone operates. This takes it back to when Excalibur and Tucson and Phoenix joined in the select group. I feel like a lot of these masterminds, Rob turns into the preacher that's talking directly to me. And I know that a lot of you feel the same way. I think as realtors, we have, and with it being with the select group, we have an ethical obligation to provide not only to our clients, but to our fellow associates to be the most informed and best agents in the markets that we operate in. It is an ethical obligation. And seeing 72 people in this group today is incredible. I can't tell you many times, though, that I'm sitting in here and we're talking about bad practices or pricing negotiations or houses that are overpriced because the client controlled the situation, that I think of a name. And I think of two names. I think of three names of people in my brokerage. And I promise you that you guys are doing the same thing. And I would be willing to bet they're not on this call. So if you know that person, put them on this call. Again, we have that ethical obligation. Let's boost our ratings and let's boost our obligation to the clients by promoting this call. It is such an incredible Friday morning activity for us.
Oh, Wilson, thank you. And I think especially today was made valuable from all the contributions that everybody chimed in. And if you didn't take a page of notes, then watch the recording and listen to the finer points, because that's what makes all the difference. So have a wonderful weekend. I'm honored to be amongst all of you, and see you next Friday.
Rob, I want to take 1 second before we hang up. I want to introduce everybody to Nicole Bennett. I know some people introduced themselves at the beginning of the call, and I know everybody has a full day ahead, but Nicole is our new managing broker for our 2 new offices, and she brings a rare combination of industry expertise, strategic vision, and leadership to our organization. Everybody reach out and connect with her when you can. Also, Renee Atkinson, our office manager, is unbelievable and super talented. I'm excited to see them work together. You guys have a great weekend. I feel the market tipping up. I'm getting more calls. Let's go sell some real estate. Come on, guys.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Rob. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.